Hello and welcome to today's video lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be going over Python Lab 4, integer division, casting, and formatting. So the goals of this lab are to learn about integer division, how to cast numbers as specific data types, and how to format numbers as currency in the output. So the program description says, create a command line program that determines the number of $50 bills to return to the customer, as well as the change, like in figure 1. So figure 1 here shows text reading, enter the amount given to the teller, and then some sort of an input. So we know there's going to be an input. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. But you should also open this up too. And then if you give me $167.23, so this looks like this is formatted as currency, I'll give you three $50 bills. Okay. So there's a couple examples. So you're going to want to test your program out a couple times to make sure it works. And then, like I said before, we're going to keep these numbers fairly small, the testing numbers. So 167.23, 225.75, rather small. It's pretty easy to tell whether or not it's generating the proper number of bills. The software requirements are that we must use the following real number variable, user num. So we're going to create a variable called usernum. And then this is camel casing, where the first word of the variable name is lowercase, and then every subsequent word would be uppercase at the beginning. So that's camel casing, and your program must use the following whole number variable, num of bills. Once again, that camel casing convention. So we're going to have a whole number variable called number of bills. So what does this mean, real and whole? So you guys have to have taken your algebra classes by now. I think it's a requirement for this class. So the real numbers are going to be any of the numbers that have the decimal points in them, and then the whole numbers are going to be your integers. So I want you to think about what that might look like in Python. Those are two different data types, right? An integer and a number that has a decimal point. Those are different. So keep that in mind. It also says you must use the appropriate type conversion, i.e. casting, to determine the number of $50 bills to return to the customer. So when it says we need to use a type conversion, remember it says in the top that we need to output this as money. So and a part of the lab goals are to format numbers as currency. So that's where that corresponds to. You must also only display two numbers after the decimal point for the change returned to the customer. So in the second part of this, it's not really shown in the output, so we'll go ahead and we'll wing it a little bit when we get to that point. But this doesn't show you the change that's left over after you've been given three $50 bills or four $50 bills. So we'll have to generate that on our own, and we'll, since it doesn't specify how the output should look for that, we get to use some of our liberties to come up with how that should look. And of course, when you're thinking of how that should look, you want it to be clear to the user what this output is saying. So keep that in mind, right? Okay, so I'm going to minimize that. And then I have a REPL opened up, and I have turned AI off. So in the previous video, AI was still stuck on, so autocomplete was on, and it was kind of messing with the instruction. And so I've turned that off. You go to Tools, and you go to, you scroll to the bottom. There's an option to turn off AI. It's a switch for autocomplete, and you just switch it. So it was rather simple after I Googled it. Okay, so the first thing we are supposed to do is create a variable called usernum. And in the lab, we wanted to get some sort of a user information. And so we're going to input, right? We're going to use the keyword input. This function is going to take in a string, enter the amount given to the teller. Okay, and we needed to cast this. So this is fine, but this is going to get a string type. So remember, strings are text. So I'm going to output, I'm going to print usernum, and I'm going to print type. Is it type of? Type? I believe it's type. Let me go ahead and try that out. But there's a keyword that we can use that'll show us what data type this variable is. So let's go ahead and run this. And I'm going to press 123.4 or 23. 123.23. It's casted as a string. So it's a string type. So I printed this function type, and this is going to tell me whatever's in the parentheses, it's going to tell me what type of variable it is. And in this case, it's shown as a string. So that's not an integer, right? That's not a decimal kind of variable. Well, what do we, before we continue, what do we even call like a variable that has a decimal in it? We call it a float, for floating point, because the decimal moves around. So we're going to call it a float. So I can't do math operations on these strings. So if I try to do, let's say, user num plus 4, this isn't going to work, and you can already see it gets you an error. Operator plus not supported for type string and literal. So this isn't going to work. This should work, right? Because look, it's 123. It's 1234.23. That should work, right? Well, it's not the proper type yet. So we need to set it to the proper type of variable so that we can use it to perform some sort of a mathematical representation and then get a result. So I'm going to get rid of these two. So again, type, you can use this to determine what type of variable you have, and then yeah, and print to output that. So I'm going to go ahead and, also it looks like I'm fairly new to REPL, but it looks like if you hover over it, it also tells you what type of variable it is. So that's pretty cool too. If you're using PyCharm, then yeah, you might want to print what variable type it is. Or if you're using debugging tools, you should be able to assess what variable type you have. So user num equals input. So what are we going to do? We're going to cast this to a floating point number. So I'm going to take the result of this. So whatever this gets us, in this example, it was 123.4.23, and we're going to convert it into a float. And why are we doing that? Because we have to do some sort of a math to get the result of this objective. So how do we do that? We're supposed to give back the number of $50 bills. So I want you to think about it first. But if you're done thinking about it, the simple way to do this is with division. So we're going to divide the user number by 50, and that's going to show us how many $50 bills we're going to get if we give this to the teller, and we want $50 bills back specifically, then this is what we're going to get. So we need to have a num of bills variable. It said we had to have this. And I'm going to take user num, and I'm going to divide it by 50. And then I'm going to print num of bills. And I'm also we're going to hover over and see what type it is. It's a float. It's of type float. And this is going to be a bit of an issue. Let's go ahead and run it. I'm going to just say a small number this time, because I seem to be having trouble saying the big number for some reason. Okay, so we got 2.4668, and that's correct. This is a pretty exact number of times that user num can be divided by 50. However, we don't want that. We want to get an integer. We want to get some sort of a definite value, because we can't have 2.4668 $50 bills. We can't do that. So what we can do is we can have two $50 bills. So we're going to need to round this part down to just this. So the way that we do that is using something called floor division. So to do that, instead of the single backslash for division, because this is how we get division in Python, you add another backslash directly next to it. And then at that point, you should have a rounding down. So I'm going to try this again. What happened? Did I press enter? Oh, I didn't run it. 123.43. Oh, I didn't print it. Silly me. Preont. Number of bills. Sorry about that. I'm going to actually get rid of some of this because I don't want to scroll down too much. So I'm going to run it. 0.34. And I get 2.0. Now I want to get a whole number. I just want to get 2. I don't want to get the 0.0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to an integer. And then when I run this, it's going to be an integer divided by another integer, right? This doesn't have a decimal point in it. And something that I wanted to touch on is if we have some sort of mathematical operation being performed upon variables or whatever we represent this as, if we have an integer and we have another number being operated on as a float, then the result will be a float. So an integer with a float result is going to be a float. It's a kind of promotion into a new variable type. And so that's something to keep in mind. I'm going to run this and then we're going to see what we get this time. 3, 2. Okay. Okay, we get 2. That's perfect. That's exactly how many dollar bills we should be getting, $50 bills we should be getting back. Not dollar bills, right? If you put in 123.43 and you get $2 back, that'd be pretty sad. And that teller might lose their job. Okay, so I'm going to delete this. That was correct. That looked good. Okay, so we have our user number, we have our number of bills, and then as part of the output, we want to print out some dashes. It looks like a line. So let's go ahead and if you can see that there's some dashes here, and then it's going to show the result. So that's what we're going to do. So we just put a few dashes here to visually separate because when we're creating the output, again, it's about the user. It's about the user's experience, and we want to make the information readable to the user. So we're going to use things like separators. We're going to use things like spaces. We're going to try not to put everything on, squish everything onto a line. We're going to try to create a clean output. And that's another thing that I want you to take away from this lab is how to create a clean output. And just keep that in mind as we go through the course. Okay, so we are to print if you give me, and then if you give me, and then in currency 225.75, I'll give you 4 $50 bills. So this 225.75 is usernum as a currency. And I'll give you 4. That 4 is the number of dollar bills. So those are variables that we're going to have to inject into our output. So that's going to give us a little bit of challenge. So let's get through it. So I want a string here, right? If you give me is a string, and I want to concatenate it. This isn't just the plus operator. This, when we're dealing with strings, is concatenation. And that's something that's going to combine with another thing. It's going to be like glue. So we're going to combine strings right now. I'm creating a string here. I'm going to create another string in just a moment. So what I need to do next is I need to create a currency output. And we did this in a previous lab. So if you remember, great. If you don't worry about it. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I have to look it up. And we explained what all of these were. So this is going to give me the 2 decimal places. This is going to give me the comma when we're past 3 digits. So that's what that's going to be. And then I need to close this curly brace here. And I'm actually referencing my notes right now because I don't remember these exactly. I don't use this fairly often, so don't worry if you have to look. Don't think that you're doing something wrong. You're not. It's new to you, and even if it wasn't new to you, if it's not something you use all the time, it's okay. Just go ahead and look it up. That's why we have the internet. Um, okay, so what am I going to format? I'm going to format usernum. So this is going to be of type string. So I don't actually need to uh, specifically, like explicitly convert it into a string. This isn't going to be a number anymore. Think about it. It's going to have commas in it. That's not what that's not the way that we input numbers when we're using Python. We just enter a number in without a comma. So in order for this to have that effect, it needs to be a string. And so this is already a string, and we can put a string and a string together. So this is going to work. This is fine. So that plus, that concatenation between this and this. And I'm going to, this string and this string, I'm going to add another string to it, right? Because there's still more to the message. If you give me usernum, I'll give you X amount of bills. So let's go ahead and complete this. So we're going to put a comma here and a space here. And this, again, is part of the output. We need to have spaces in between the number that we're going to show, right? That's how it would look in a regular sentence. That's how you're going to do it. So make sure that you're adding spaces where you need to add spaces. Just be considerate of that. It might take a little trial and error, especially if you're new to this. And I'm going to type in, what does the lab say? I'll give you, okay, I'm going to put a space there. And now I want something else. I want to put the number of bills. And in order to do this, I can't, remember we were talking about different types. I can't just put num of bills right here. You see that there's going to be an error. It's going to say, hey, you can't combine this string with this, this integer. You can't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast number of bills as a string. So we're going to temporarily, as far as this application is concerned, we're going to cast num of bills as a string so that we can combine it with another string. And this is going to show me my output. So we're almost done. We're almost in the clear of the first part of this lab. So we want to now concatenate it with space, and then we'll put a $sign. Where is my $sign? I always have trouble finding my $sign on my keyboard. So $sign, $50 bills. I apologize if you hear barking in the background. My dog is kind of going off right now. I think there's the mailman outside, and she tends to get really nervous when the mailman comes. So she might be barking. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so this looks good. It's giving me a little bit of, not an error, but this is called a warning message. It's telling me that the line is too long. It's fine. It's just a warning. Warnings aren't going to stop your program from running. It's just going to alert you, hey, did you mean to do it this way? Is this the way you meant to do it? And an error is different. Your program won't run at all. And you may get an error message that tells you, hey, we ran into this type of error. So I'm going to run this, enter the amount given to the teller, 123.34, enter. If you give me 123.34, I'll give you two $50 bills. Something I want to test is that comma. So I'm going to run this again, and I'm going to create a larger number. So I want to see a comma somewhere in here, right? So I'm going to press enter. Okay, that looks correct. It provided a comma, and it gave me 2 places after the decimal to represent my cents. Okay, so we're pretty good right now. This is fine. but we want to also get the change, the number of, or the amount of change. So you have a $50 bill and then you have some amount of money left over. So over here, let's create a variable called change. And again, this was, there weren't any specifications on the lab for how to do this part, and it wasn't specified on the output. So this part, we get to choose how we want to do this. So if you want to do this another way, go ahead. You can do that. You can stop the video here and go ahead and create this another way. If you want to see how I solve it, just stay on. So I'm going to take the user num. So change is going to be the user num minus, and then create parentheses. And then this is going to be num of bills times 50. So what's the deal with the parentheses, right? Why did we put parentheses? Why did we put num of bills times 50 in parentheses? Well, just like in your algebra classes, in Python, we follow the order of operations. So explicitly, this, I don't believe this would be affected, but it's really important that you use your parentheses where you need them to be. This is specifically so that whatever's in parentheses goes first, and then whatever else comes next, right? So please keep that in mind if you are if you're creating a program and the result is a little bit wonky, check your math, make sure that you've followed your order of operations. Sometimes that can be a reason why you're not getting the right kind of output. And think about it. Your program will still run, right? But you're going to have an erroneous answer, something that's just not correct. So you definitely have different types of errors. You have the ones where it's like a syntax error, and the console will tell you, hey, I found something wrong here. I think this is where it's coming from. And then you have the type of errors that happen that are logical errors. And those are errors where there's nothing wrong with your code, but the logic of your code didn't work out. There's some kind of a breakdown there. And those are harder to find the solution for. Okay, so now we want to output change. So I'm actually going to copy this because we're going to output it as money. I'll just Control C. And then let's add to this output. And then we'll plus. So change is going to be and then we're going to say plus as change. Let's see how this works out. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this. I think I'm looking at it, I'm just inspecting it lightly, and then I'm going to run it. So it says enter the amount given to the teller, a small number that's easy to determine if it's running correctly. I press enter. If you give me 123.34, I'll give you two $50 bills and 23.34 as change. So $23.34 as change. This looks fine, right? This is good. This is one way that you can solve this, and play around with it a little bit. And if you run into any trouble, feel free to message me. I will respond to you as soon as I can. I love helping you guys, and you don't need to worry about, hey, am I infringing on somebody? Like, you're not infringing on me. That's why I'm here. So go ahead and play around with this. If you don't want to play around with this, and if you want to just end the video here, you can. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful day.